Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman, also known as the Comeback Coach. Guys, today's episode is going to be life changing for somebody out there. I know it is going to be for me. My friend Rachel, we're going to be talking about mental health and how when veterans struggle, we also feel like we're alone a lot. Today, we're not alone anymore. Rachel's coming on the show. She's a United States Navy veteran, podcast host, one of my favorite new podcasts that I listen to. I listen to almost every single episode. I think it's amazing. And she's a mental health advocate. So, guys, the stuff we're going to talk about today, it's not sexy. It's not, but it's very important to talk about mental health issues because we're losing up to 55 veterans and first responders a day. So I definitely want to take a deep dive into mental health. So make sure you subscribe and make sure that you get notifications because you're going to want to share this episode and listen to it again. Rachel, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Richard.
I love it. And by the way, your podcast is truly amazing. If your numbers have gone up, I take personal responsibility because I think I've listened to everyone at least 2 or 3 times because you have some amazing content.
Thank you.
So let me ask you a question before, because I got a traumatic brain injury. If I don't ask the question, I'll forget it. What is your definition of resiliency?
You know, resiliency, if you'd asked me this question a few years ago, my answer probably would have been a lot different than it is today. But resiliency, what it used to mean to me was your standard probably definition of, someone who's been through a lot and they've made it through to the other side. But I think my definition of resiliency today looks a little different. Still encompassing, someone who's been through stuff. But I think the biggest thing is to continue pushing forward no matter what, to be very, very clear on what the vision and the goal is for whoever you are, whoever you might be, whatever your mission, your passion, your purpose is, always keeping that in mind and pushing forward towards that no matter what adversity gets thrown at us. I think that's what right now at this season of my life, that's what I truly believe resiliency is.
Okay, now one of the reasons I wanted to come on and talk to you to come on is because I think that whenever I have a psychologist or a psychiatrist come on with a bunch of acronyms after their name, the veterans will listen, but they kind of tune them out. But once you have somebody that's here that has actually raised their hand and said, took their oath, we know each other. We know we can listen because we've all been there. We've all done that. We all threw the T-shirt away. So that's why I wanted to have you come on, especially because I think women veterans do not get the respect that they deserve. And that's why we have a lot of women veterans come on the show because they have a whole different perspective on the veteran life. So I want to say thank you so much for coming on today. And I'm grateful for you. So now let me ask you a question. Give us a quick down and dirty on who you are, where'd you come from, where'd you grow up, and a little bit about your military service.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Iowa, Midwest, born and raised, stayed in Iowa most of my life until I joined the Navy in 2015 is when I left for boot camp. Prior to joining the military, there's really not a whole lot of military background in my family. My dad's from Nigeria. My mom did serve a little bit in the Army band back in the day. And then, on her side of the family, there's a number of people who served Navy or whatever have you. But military wasn't something that was really talked about a whole lot in my household. And realistically, my reasons for joining weren't necessarily because of prior family or anyone that had joined. I had just gotten out of a really toxic relationship, 3.5-year relationship with someone that really, really brought me down in my life. And I was ready for some drastic change and something different. And so I had left for the Navy purely just to do something for me, something to really just disrupt my life, get me out of Iowa and try something different. And so, when I joined, I had initially planned to be an AV or air rescue swimmer, AIRR, and didn't work out. My run time wasn't fast enough. So I ended up leaving for avionics and specifically the intermediate level as an AT, aviation electronics technician. And so I joined not really knowing what my plan was. I think a lot of people, when they join, they're like, I'm going to do 20 years, unless they specifically know that they just want to do their 4 years, get out, get their college degree. So I initially was like, 20 years, not that bad, not that long of a time. I think I'll go for it. And so I started creating kind of this roadmap in my head of what I wanted my military service to really look like. And, I was like, I'm going to try to go for spec ops again, aviation, or the air rescue swimmer, or maybe Navy diver. I mean, the world was really my oyster at this point, and I could do whatever I wanted. I would say that, initially right after boot camp was the first culture shock that hit me. And it as far as the military not being what I expected it to be, I ended up getting stationed out in Whidbey Island, Washington, where I still currently reside today. Spent time at three different commands there. I left the military last year, as actually it was limb due right before I got out, because a coworker of mine took his life, and that really, really impacted me. The reason why I started my podcast that I have today, Your Story Doesn't End Here, is because of the mental health challenges that I faced when I was serving, and that I continue to see people face today, and the people that I lost to suicide when I was still serving. And so that's the quick down and dirty, the synopsis of why I do what I do today and where I came from, and really looking forward to diving deeper into this.
Yep. All right, guys, we got to go. It's been a great show. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. Let's hop in the Wayback Machine. So, why did you choose Navy over Army, Marines, Air Force?
Honestly, because I looked at the different mile run or the different runs, and one was 3 miles, one was like a mile and a half, 2 miles, and then I think 2 services had the shortest runs. It was Navy, and it was someone else. I want to say Air Force. Don't quote me on that. And I don't think I was eligible to get into the Air Force or Navy. It was. I'm not a runner.
All right. So now tell us a little bit about what was your basic training experience like? Because obviously males go through a lot of different basic training experience, and a lot of women they struggle a little bit more because they're dealing with a lot of other stuff that guys are not really dealing with in basic training. So talk to us a bit about your basic training experience.
Yeah, so when I joined in 2015, the Navy was kind of going through a transformational period. A few years prior, the Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program had just been started up. If you look at, Tailhawk and everything, that had been, I want to say a decade earlier. I don't remember the exact dates on that, but obviously change takes a bit of time in the military, especially when we're talking about like a recruit training command or any kind of boot camp. I want to say that's usually the last people to really get wind of the change that's happening. And so when I had joined, a lot of the leaders, the RDCs is what they called them in Navy boot camp, really just didn't quite know how to treat females. And so I'd say if I was to encompass my boot camp experience in one word, it was very disappointing, because I had a higher expectation of what it was going to be. I think a lot of us join the military and boot camp and we expect it to be the hardest season of our entire lives. We expect it to be something where we come out on the other side and we're like, wow, I did that. I'm so proud of myself. That was really hard, but I persevered. I'd say that there was a lot of hand holding. There was a lot of times when I thought that, maybe someone would be punished, or, someone would be, a situation would be addressed, and it wasn't. Now, I'll give a specific example. I had a rack mate who, in the Navy, we're really big about folding your clothes in your rack, making sure that everything is in its specific place. And I had a rack mate who literally just threw her clothes into her rack, and it just wasn't really like, they didn't really do anything about it. I think they might like slightly scolded her, but like that was it. And at the end of boot camp, I had a chief who addressed our division, and he was like, hey guys, like, how was this experience for you as women? I'm curious, like, were we too hard on you? Were we too soft on you? And the majority of us said you were way too easy on us. And he told us that he didn't really know how to handle females in the military in recruit training command, because once the military had came out with this sapper program, a lot of males were like, oh, I'm hands off. I don't want to say the wrong thing and offend someone. I don't want to put myself in the position where I'm going to get in trouble. And I don't think that's the response that the military was going for. And I don't think that that's the idea of the separate program. If we all just treat each other as human beings, then there's not going to be any issues. But there was definitely a bias towards, ITing the males more than the females, spending more time in the male division than the female division, and being a lot harder on the males. So, pretty disappointing at the end of the day. I'd say I've gone through tougher things in my life. But overall, I mean, it was a good experience. I enjoyed it. I still got through it and I made it through. There's still challenging pieces to it. Just not the most challenging thing in my life like I expected it to be.
All right. So you said, once you got in, you started to experience some mental health issues. For me, as anybody knows my story, I dealt with a lot of childhood trauma. And I added the military to the mix. And then I added the alcohol to the mix. And it became the perfect storm. Did you have any underlying trauma coming into the military?
Oh, absolutely. And what's interesting is I didn't realize the amount of underlying trauma that I had. It probably didn't hit me, like connecting dots in my life didn't really hit me until I was probably around 27 years old. And to put into perspective, I turned 30 in a few days. So it was literally like a few years ago that I really started connecting dots and realizing, oh wow, this is connected to this. This is why I act this way. But yeah, I didn't have diagnosed childhood trauma. My family wasn't really the type of family that believed in taking care of mental health issues or addressing mental health issues. I think, a lot of parents in the 90s and before, that wasn't really something that was talked about. So kind of a newer topic. I say newer, quotations, but kind of a newer topic as we come into these years now compared to when I was younger. But I did, and I'd say still dealing with some of that stuff today.
All right. So now I got out in 2012, not by my choice, but because I got hurt on duty. And so they medically retired me. But I came in, I'm an OG. That means I'm an old guy. I came in 1985, 86. So back then it was, if you're struggling with something, suck it up, buttercup, we'll deal with it later. But it seems like they're trying to change that narrative now. But can you remember back to your first issue that you had mentally in the military? Can you take us back to that day?
Yeah, I can actually. And, when I had first gotten to my first command, I was actually in a C school and I had been struggling with really, really bad anxiety for a couple weeks and just kind of brushed it off. But when I was in my C school, I had an instructor that I was talking to and I was telling him about the issues I was experiencing. And to give more specific examples, when I say I had a really bad anxiety, my anxiety was affecting me physically. So I would get extremely bad panic attacks. I would feel like my heart was racing. I don't know that it actually was racing, but I would feel like my heart was like beating out of my chest and racing. I would get, the increased breathing. And then probably the most profound symptom to me was that I could not think straight. Like I would get so in my head that the only thing that I could do if I was in the position to do it was take a nap. And looking back into my childhood, I experienced this multiple times before, but didn't really realize that that was related to anxiety. But this was happening to me in the military. And I couldn't focus on my job and learn my job correctly. And I was in a brand new command, brand new job. I had never done anything like this a day in my life. And so that was stressful on top of the panic attacks that I was having. And then I was trying to start going to school to start on my associate's degree. And I had signed up for all the classes. I'd gone through the whole process of getting tuition assistance, everything I needed to do. And then literally a week before school started, I went and I dropped every single class because my anxiety was so bad. And so then I had realized at this point that my anxiety was preventing me from doing things in my life. because this was a pattern, me stopping things because I couldn't mentally handle it. And so I was chit chatting with an instructor. I was telling him what was going on, and he was like, "Hey, you should probably go talk to someone at medical about this." And so, I did. And, I went and I talked to someone in the clinic, and that started my whole slew. I don't know if you want me to get into this particularly. It started my whole slew of issues with the mental health system in the military.
Well, you know what? You know my show. We keep it real 100. So, because a lot of people don't know the back, what it's like behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So, what you dealt with behind the scenes with mental health.
Yeah. So, I'd gone to the clinic, just your regular clinic. They're not mental health. It was just it was a corpsman, not a doctor. There is a difference. And I was like, "Hey, I have anxiety." And the first words out of this man's mouth were, "You cannot be in the Navy with anxiety." And so I'm like an E2 at the time. I'm a little taken back because I'm like, "Well, what do you mean I can't be in the Navy with anxiety?" And he didn't really, from what I remember, I don't think he really like expounded on that to tell me, why he didn't think I could be in the Navy with anxiety. That's not true, by the way. If you're listening, you can 100% be in the military with anxiety. There's certain things that will get you separated from the military for mental health, but it's a very long process. They're not just going to kick you out for going in and say have anxiety. But long story short, what he did was he set me up with the psychologist through, what was it? It wasn't behavioral health, it was occupational health. He set me up with a psychologist, and then he put me on a medication. What is it called? It's like a higher strength Benadryl, hydroxyzone, I want to say. I can't remember the exact name, but it's like a high strength Benadryl. And all that it does, it's supposedly, there's some like clinical research saying that it helps calm you. All it really did for me was made me extremely groggy. I mean, if you've taken Benadryl before, Benadryl makes you groggy. So obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a calming effect because it's making you tired. Caveat to that, I can't take it during the day. My panic attacks and everything I'm having are happening also during the day, not just at night. And so, I took this for a little bit and I was like, this isn't working. But I started talking to this psychologist, and all she was really doing was she was giving me coping mechanisms, and she was just kind of throwing little textbook things at me here and there. And I didn't really feel like it was helping. And I told her, like, this is great that you're giving me these coping mechanisms, but my physical symptoms of anxiety are so bad that I am not even doing these coping mechanisms because my anxiety is preventing me from doing things in my life. So I really feel like I'm at a point where I need to be medicated so that the therapy can actually do its job. And she looked at me and she said, if you want to be on medication, that's fine. I can't prescribe you medication, but you're not going to do medication and therapy at the same time. You pick one or you pick the other. And if you want to be on medication, good luck being on medication for the rest of your life. So I was like, I'm thinking in my head, well, why can't I do both? Why can I not be on medication and be in therapy? Why does it have to be one or the other? But for her, it was very black and white. From that day forward, I never went back to her. I had a friend that was going to the actual mental health clinic on base. And she was like, hey, the front desk lady there's really sweet. Just go in there, talk to her, fill out the intake form, see what happens with that. But she is having a pretty good experience over there. I don't know about so much with her therapist, but I know she really liked the front desk lady. So she's like, that's a step. Just go talk to her, get the paperwork started. So I went in there. It's like a 10-page form to fill out. I filled out everything. I don't know that I was completely honest when I filled out the form. And I think that a lot of people in the military, when they go into mental health or even physical health, because I'm guilty of this too, not being fully honest with everything that I fill out on the form, because I don't want to deal with the consequences of me being fully honest on that form, because I know that it's going to lead to more. And so, yeah, I mean, there's layers to this, right? There's still a little bit of a stigma there. And from where I had came from with a psychologist telling me that, I couldn't be medicated and I couldn't be doing therapy, I'm already going into there with this mindset that I have a group of people that don't really care, but trying to be open-minded. So, I went in and I talked to the intake guy. He set me up with a therapist. And then they hadn't set me up with a psychiatrist just yet to give me medication, but I started seeing the therapist. I only saw her about 2 times. I also felt like she was just really throwing textbook coping mechanisms at me instead of digging into things. And I found out later on, way later on, in fact, more recently, that the Navy really only hires social workers. They're not hiring licensed mental health counselors. And I don't know if this is an across the board thing. I don't know if it was just the base that I was at. It's something that I'm trying to dive deeper into now to figure out. But the fact of the matter is that these people that are hired, some of them are not even equipped to handle PTSD patients. Some of them are not even equipped to handle TBI patients or people that might be experiencing more than just a like, oh, I'm having a hard time because I switched commands. So, I got diagnosed with what's called an adjustment disorder, knowing very well that I had more than what was just an adjustment disorder. But on paper, an adjustment disorder looks good enough that they know that I went to mental health, but it's not preventing me from doing my job. It's not pulling me out of anything. And so it really is just about making the military look good. And everyone on that base is still working for the military. They don't have my best interest in mind. So I kind of knew this a little bit when I was going and talking to the therapist and why I stopped seeing her. And I was like, you know what? I just want to be on medication. So I went to the front desk lady. I was like, hey, I really just came here because I want to be on some kind of medication that's going to help me with my physical anxiety symptoms. And she's like, okay, well, there's 2 different psychiatrists. One is civilian, one is military. She's like, I'm going to get you set up with the civilian one because I had what's called high functioning anxiety. And she said, if he sees you come in there and act like a normal human being, he is not going to give you medication. I said, are you kidding me? Like, you realize that mental health is something that you can't physically see, right? So what he wanted me to come in there and like break down and cry and act like I needed, like I was just a complete mess and, you know, haul me off to the psych ward or something, and I was like, I can still function. I can still present as a normal human being. And a lot of people with high functioning anxiety, if you really look deeper into the way they're acting, you'll see that they overachieve. They will, they'll be very organized in certain situations, maybe not so organized in other situations. They look like high performers, which if you learn how to control it, that can be a huge advantage. But if you don't know how to control it and you're in a state of anxiety and panic and crisis all the time, you might just present as a high performer, but deep down inside be struggling. And so this is kind of the crossroads that I was at. And I finally got set up with a psychiatrist who's a civilian. Thankfully, he did put me on medication, and I was okay with him for a number of years until my symptoms started to worsen. And I came back to him and I was like, I want to try therapy now. And this was probably like 3 years down the road or something. And I was like, I want to try therapy on top of my medication. The medication's not working the way I need it to anymore, but I understand that medication's just a band-aid and I need to deal with these issues personally. I didn't want to go back and see the same therapist that I'd seen previously because I knew I didn't have a great experience with her. Mental health was telling me, no, you need to go back and see the same lady, decide if you don't like her. And then if you don't like her, then we'll get you set up with someone else. But, keep in mind, it's 30 days just to see this lady you don't want to see. And then it's going to be another 30 plus days to see another person that you may or may not like. And, there's a 3-year gap in between this. But the point that I want to bring up here about the civilian guy is that when I told him that I didn't want to be seen on base, I wanted to be seen off base. And he argued with me that no one would see me off base because people had appointments that were pushed way too far out. The people at the front desk argued with me and told me that no one would see me out in town because the people out in town had appointments that were pushed too far out. So I took it upon myself to find someone out in town that could see me that week. And I said, hey, they accept TRICARE. They can see me this week. All I need is a referral from you. And my psychiatrist literally argued with me in his office. And he told me, you just need to wait the 30 days to see someone here. And I said, what about these people that are not suicidal right now? Because this was me, not suicidal right now, but can't wait 30 days because in 30 days I might be suicidal. What about them? He literally physically threw his hands up in the air and he's like, you just have to wait 30 days. That's just what it is. And this was my continuous experience at mental health, was me arguing with the people that were supposed to be helping me. And I just think to myself, like, man, it's a good thing that I wasn't in crisis mode. And it's a good thing that I wasn't about to go take my own life, because if I was, they would have been the reason. The people that are supposed to be saving lives, they would have been the reason that I took my own life, because they went out of their way to make it blatantly clear and obvious that they did not care. And so I mean, that's my entire experience, mental health in the military, and it's awful.
Now, how many years did you do total?
6.5.
All right, I want to hop into why you got out, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But first, I want to thank our sponsors. As you guys know, I try to save as many lives as I can with this show. I make $0 from this show. I actually take money out of my pocket every month for this show so we can get on the air. But what I do is I just came out with a brand new T-shirt. It on the back it says, "Today I decided not to become a statistic," and because I love T-shirts and I love looking at people's T-shirts, and when I seen that on somebody else's T-shirt, I was like, I gotta have that. And for me, for everybody that buys a T-shirt like this, 100%, every single penny of the proceeds go to help veterans struggling with PTSD and homelessness. Also, my book just hit #1 twice on Amazon. It's called A Hero's Journey from Darkness to Light. And if you guys pick it up, it's actually a teaching book. It's my story, but the last 2 chapters are, what does addiction look like? Not what you think it looks like. And what does depression look like? And it's not what you think it looks like. So it's actually a teaching book. If you pick up the book, 100% of the proceeds go to help veterans struggling with PTSD and homelessness. So guys, if you love coffee, I got a coffee company. If you coffee, books, or T-shirts, whatever you guys are interested in, thank you for supporting us. Right down below, and I'll get you the information. So let me ask you now, because when I got discharged out of the military, I got blinded. So you can't see, you can't shoot. We don't need you. And then when they finally said, you are no longer Sergeant Kaufman, and that just pushed me over the edge. And that was the day that I attempted suicide, Memorial Day 2012, because I realized that once you get out of the military doesn't give a shit about you. Your phone stops ringing. You no longer have the camaraderie, and you no longer have a mission. And that's what pushed me down to a really dark road. So talk to us about you getting out of the military, and what was your transitioning like?
Yeah, so it was probably about 3.5 years into the military where I really, really learned and decided that the military wasn't the organization that I thought it was, and that I decided I wanted to get out. Now, when I had originally signed up for the military, I signed a 4-year active contract, 4-year inactive ready reserves. But around my 3-year mark, the Navy came out with something that it matched the PRD to the EAOS or vice versa. So either I moved my rotation date, which was past my actual end of my contract. It was at the 6.5-year mark to the end of my contract, or I pushed out my time to 6.5 years total. And the military literally gave us like a week, less than a week, to make this decision on our lives. Like, hey, do you want to get out next year, or do you want to get out in 3.5 years from now? And at the time, I was like, I just put in an officer package for the nurse corps. I was going to school. I was busting my ass. And everyone that I talked to was like, oh, it's going to look really, really bad if you tell the military that you want to get out next year. Not knowing that I could have at any time decided to extend if I wanted. But I ended up extending to the 6.5-year mark when I would be getting out. And so, it was very early on that I decided that this isn't an organization I want to be part of. But by the time I decided that, it was already too late. My extension paperwork had already gone through. And so I ended up serving a little longer than initially expected. But, I'd say that my drive to succeed in the military was not there the last couple of years that I was in. And I really shifted my focus more towards standing up for myself, standing up for other people. And, still it's just kind of innate in me to take care of the people around me and to better the organization or the area that I'm a part of. And so that's what I did. But I wasn't trying to take on all these extra collateral duties and, do all the extra that was going to take up unnecessary time for me. I wanted to give the chance to the other people that wanted to be in. And so with that, the people around me in the command that I was at really didn't like me. They saw me as someone that was just someone who didn't care, someone who didn't want to follow orders. And don't get me wrong, I did my job every single day. I was good at my job. I just didn't want to be a collateral duty inspector of the aircraft that I was working on. And they didn't like that. And so I spent a number of years at this command where the people around me weren't huge fans of me. And it was it was a little over a year before I was supposed to get out because I got out September of 2021. And there was a coworker of mine. He was an E6, and he was like one of the world's most like bubbly guys, had a little bit of a dark sense of humor. He's a really, really big guy. Like he was over 6 foot tall. But like one of the coolest, most annoying people I'd ever met in my life. Just kind of one of those guys. I'm sure, every one of us knows someone like that in our life, right? And so, anyway, that was just normally how he was. But one night at work, I was working second shift or third shift. I can't remember. It was nighttime. I remember that. Actually, I think I had just come for third shift and second shift was leaving. And me and another one of my friends, she needed to get something checked off for a qualification she was trying to renew, and he happened to be QA. And so, we needed him to go out to the plane with us. She needed me to be her worker because she was the collateral duty inspector, and then he was QA. And so it was dark outside because it was second going on to third shift. There wasn't a whole lot of people at work, and the plane was way out on the flight line. And so we're walking however many feet out to the plane on the flight line, and he's just very, very like different. He's going through some stuff in his personal life. He's telling us all about it, and he just didn't seem like himself. Something was slightly off, but I was like, maybe he's just like going through a hard time. And we let him talk, we let him vent. And after we got off the plane, I guess he said something along the lines of, "It's okay, like, I know what I'm gonna do next." And I don't remember that, my friend remembers that, and, she said it haunts her till this day because that weekend, this was a Friday when we had left work, that following Monday, it was actually the Sunday before he came to work, everyone had heard that he took his life, and we had a really hard time with it. My friend, had actually just left for a detachment on the East Coast. And then I had just come into work because they called us all into work early. And I didn't really quite know why they called us into work early, but they told us all kind of in a group setting, like, oh, he took his life. They're like, we're all here for you. There's counselors, they did the whole shebang. Like when someone dies in the military, there's counselors over here. We're going to take an hour and then, we're going to get right back to work. And I could not. Like, I was so distraught by this situation. And they had, they'd done the memorials, they had done the get-togethers, and everyone was sad about it, but a lot of people weren't affected to the point that I was affected. And I was affected, because I had known this guy. I mean, I had known him literally since 2015, 2016, when I first came to this base. He was at 2 commands with me. But B, because of that interaction that I had had with him a few days before he took his life, I felt a lot of guilt because of that. And I was really, really struggling with just being in the same space that we were all in, because it was giving me panic attacks and they were coming back again. And so, I ended up getting switched over to limited duty status, not without fight, of course, because again, it's a mental health thing. So, I couldn't go to work. I had to get my flight doc to give me 2 weeks of SIQ for me to not go into work, because my job refused to let me work in a different area other than the area that I did not want to be in, because it was giving me panic attacks. Mental health would not help me out in any capacity, because I was supposed to have an appointment with my psychiatrist in like 2 days. And so they were like, well, we can't do anything for you. We can't write you any note. We can't give you a safe space to be in while you're struggling with this stuff. Nothing. They wouldn't do anything. Only person that would help me was my flight doc, who was like, hey, I understand. I get it. You just lost someone really close to you. Let me write you SIQ so you can just hang out at home for 2 weeks while we figure out your limited duty paperwork. And so when I finally got my lim due paperwork sorted out, I got moved to a different command. And thankfully, that's where I was able to spend my last year in the Navy. I'm really grateful for that, because it gave me the time to sort out everything that I needed to sort out and make my transition a lot smoother. My lim due command was really, really awesome about letting me do the things that I needed to do. I was able to get into therapy at that point. And so I actually had a pretty good transition process getting out. The only, let's say, like, curveball that life threw at me was I got pregnant a few months before I got out. Wasn't planning on that, wasn't expecting that. And yeah, I still rolled with it. I still got out of the military. And that I'd say that threw me into another set of mental health issues. And so it's always like a roller coaster with me. And I think it is with everyone, right? I mean, we think that we're good, we think that life's on track, and then all of a sudden life's like, oh, just kidding, and throws a curveball at us. And it's figuring out how to handle that. A lot of times, how I handle new things that come up in my life is I just give myself time to figure it out. But the actual transition from the military, only because I was in a limited duty status, was a pretty good transition. Didn't happen the way that I wanted it to, but as far as, getting all my I's dotted, my T's crossed, and everything from that standpoint, because I was able to slow down for a year. And I wish that every service member was given this chance to just take 6 months to a year in their last bit in the military and just slow down for a bit, figure out what they need. Because, yeah, I mean, when you have people like you that are just thrown to the curb and like, oh, just kidding. Today you're this, tomorrow you're not. I mean, I assume that'd make it that much harder, but I'm very grateful that I was in a position. I mean, unfortunately, because someone took his life, that I was in that position. But at the end of the day, it ended up working out well for me to have a smoother transition out.
Yeah, because for me, I've noticed that no matter what job we have or what career, whether it's veteran, whether it's military, whether it's police, whether it's athlete, whatever job you have, there's a shelf life. And you don't see many 90-year-old active duty military people around. So a lot of times, what we do becomes who we are. And then when we hit the streets, and okay, you're no longer Sergeant Kaufman. All right, well, who's Richard? Well, I don't know who Richard was, because for the last 23 years, he's been Sergeant Kaufman. So I find that a lot of people, when they get out of the military, it takes them a long time to reinvent and reimagine a new life. And a lot of us still have our foot in the old way, and it prevents us from going into the future. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So how did you go about, reimagining and then having to reinvent yourself as a civilian and not as a Navy member?
I didn't think that I would have to at first. And I really thought that because I had that year, and I thought that because I took 60 days of terminal leave, I thought that I'd be good. But what's crazy is, even if you spend 4 years in the military, you still had a time period of your life where everyone was telling you what to do. You always knew what the next step was going to be, to a point. And there's all these little things, right? Like, you can't leave a certain radius of your base. You can't look a certain way. You know what you're going to wear every single day. And so these are the things that I really noticed affect me. But I would say when I first got out, I had a solid like 2 weeks of my life where I did not do anything. It was like that decompression time where I just sat at my house. I don't even think I left my house for like 2 weeks. And I was just like, it was like the idea of all this freedom was almost overwhelming for me to a point. And I didn't expect that because I was like, oh, I've done this before, but I was a civilian. I didn't join right out of high school. I knew what that life looked like, but it's like a part of me forgot what it looked like. And so I don't want to say that I fully formed an identity with the military because I decided very early on that I wanted to get out. And I did have a little bit more time to, quote unquote, decompress or, figure out my life on the other side of the military. But there were just certain things for me that were so different that some things I didn't even realize were different. And it's a little tough for me to answer that question because I think that there's still some things that I'm still working through. I just got out a little over a year ago, September of last year. And then, right, I experienced so many changes at once, Richard, between me being pregnant and getting out of the military. I was supposed to go to nursing school, but that changed for me last minute. And literally my entire life got shifted upside down and everything changed. And I'd say it's literally taken me almost a full year just to get to the point where I feel like I'm just starting to slowly figure out my life again and
And
this new part of my life.
something, you decide to get out of the military and then boom, you're right in the middle of a pandemic. So it's not like you could just get out and start enjoying life, going out to dinner and starting enjoying life. Now you get out, because like Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. So now you get out and now you're in the middle, you have a child and you're in the middle of the pandemic. So that must have been like totally just, I can't imagine what that would have been like to finally have freedom, but I can't go anywhere.
Yeah. 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 Thankfully, I didn't get out like in the 2020 part of the pandemic where it was like complete lockdown. But yeah, I mean, COVID was still affecting things last year, right? I mean, my nursing school in general, like we had this COVID vaccine that had just come out. And that was a lot of the reason why I couldn't continue going to nursing school. I was pregnant. I didn't want to get a COVID vaccine while I was pregnant, and I could not get an exemption from anyone. It ended up working out because my clinicals would have been 12 hours, 2 hours away from my house. And that was not going to happen while I was pregnant. I'd like to think that it could have, but realistically, no, that wasn't what was best for me. And so, yeah, I mean, there were so many things that were still in place COVID wise that were affecting my life. And then all these changes all at once. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it doesn't matter when you enter versus when you leave the military. The world's going to always look a little bit different when you go back into society compared to what it used to be. Because I think in the military, we're so focused on our little bubble of the military, and we try really hard to still be part of that civilian life. But at the end of the day, like we can't relate to civilians and civilians can't relate to us. So we have to find that common ground where we can relate to being a civilian again. And I have not worked a W-2 job since I've gotten out of the military. So I can't speak to that aspect, but I can say that like I thrust myself into the entrepreneur side of life. And that was challenging. Like going from someone telling you what to do every single day and knowing what's laid out for you next to now having to think for yourself and set your own schedule for the day. Like that mindset wise, it's extremely challenging.
All right. So now, like when I started my show, it started 3 years ago. So it was right before the pandemic happened. But then when the pandemic hit and everybody was home, I'm thinking, this is great. Everybody's going to be home. So more people are going to be listening to podcasts. So I took it as a positive and I kind of turned it around instead of being such a negative. So what was it like starting out your podcast and what made you start a podcast to begin with?
Yeah, so I had wanted to start something for a while, and I was thinking YouTube initially, and I actually took the steps to start a YouTube channel, and then I realized that video is a lot of extra work. And yeah, you can start YouTube podcasts. A lot of people do. I know your podcast goes out on YouTube, right? And there's ways to do it, but I just didn't want to go straight to the video world right away. And so I thought podcast pretty early on in 2021, but I didn't know how to do it. And so it just so happened that end of 2021, one of my dear friends, Morgan Nelson, he's over in Australia. He has one of the top personal development podcasts in Australia. He started a podcast course and he was like, hey guys, I'm going to show you the tips and tricks that I used to start my podcast and to push my podcast to the top. And I was like, oh, this is my chance to learn what it takes to start a podcast. And so I invested in his course. I learned the basics and I just started. I didn't have any kind of specific plan for what my podcast was going to look like. I knew that I wanted to bring people on to share their stories. I didn't even know if people would be interested in doing something like this, but I was like, this is very important to me. And I think that people need to know because I don't even think people fully understood the extent of my own story and what I experienced, because there were people that still thought that me going to Bahrain meant that, I was going to be in the middle of a war somewhere. Like there's people that just don't understand that every person in the military goes through a different experience, even if they're in the same branch. And so the main reason I started my podcast was because I wanted people to know the stories of people that are in the military and what it's really like. That raw, real version of this is not what you see on TV. This is not what you see in the movies, because even that's a little doctored up to look different. This is what the real true stories of these people are. And this is why mental health needs to change in the military, because people are suffering. People are getting sexually assaulted. People are taking their lives. There's people that want to take their lives, but they aren't because something is helping them hang on every single day. And the military is not doing enough for an organization that has the funds, they have the means, they have the ability to do this. They are not doing enough. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, they're not even trying to do enough, because when I put out my petition to the McPon in 2019, and I sent him a 2 to 3 page Word document laying out steps that the military could take immediately, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I mean, we could have had programs changed by now. We could have had things in place. Nothing's changed. So, that's the main reason why I started the podcast, is because I'm like, if the civilians knew, if the public knew what was really going on in the military, they would be enraged. And so, I'm still growing. And, the goal is to get this stuff out into the media so that people understand and know this is what's going on. These are these people's stories. They're not changed in any way. I don't have people censor themselves in any way. I say, come on here, tell me your story. And I believe that every person's story matters. And so it's really just become a platform for people to share their stories and a platform to promote and create change within the system.
Well, I've been blessed to be able to be a part of it, and I'm so grateful and humbled. So now, say if there's somebody that's watching this, maybe they got a year left in the military, they know they're going to get out. What are some of the steps they can start taking, before they get out of the military to ease some of that burden of getting out of the military?
Yeah, so I think it just, at the end of the day, it depends on what you want to do. And I would say, first of all, don't let the military work you to the bone till the day that you get out. I knew people that went through this, and I told myself that I wasn't going to, even if I was at that command and not in a limb due status. If you are letting the military work you to the bone till the day you get out, you don't have the time to take care of you, and you're going to be stressed out when you get out of the military, because that transition is going to be a very abrupt, one day you're here, one day you're here. So I would say, first of all, take the time for you, understand that you're getting out. So the military's opinion of you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you get the biggest award when you separate. No one cares on the other side. It doesn't matter if if you have the highest opinion, if everyone has the highest opinion of you when you get out, because realistically, on the civilian side, no one cares. Figure out what you want to do and take every step to make sure that you are living that life when you get out. But know that something might not go the way you want it to be. That's okay. It's okay to have a plan B if you want to have a plan B. I was very resistant to the idea of a plan B because I was like, nope, my plan A is going to work. I don't need a plan B to distract me. My plan A didn't work, which is fine for me because, I figured it out. But I think it's okay to have a plan A and it's okay to have a plan B, but I'd say the biggest piece of advice that I could give people getting out of the military is to take as much time as you need for you. Make sure that you're taking that full last year, if not longer, to just set everything in place. Do you need to go to school? Do you need to find a mentor? Do you need to, get into certain programs? Do you need a coach? I mean, what is it that you want to do? Maybe you don't know what you want to do yet. So maybe you need to interview some people. Maybe you need to get on LinkedIn and start reaching out and networking to people. Take the time to do that, because if the military is working you 12 hours plus a day every day, and then you have to go home and you have to take care of yourself and your family, cleaning, all the other things in your life, then getting out of the military is going to be the last thing on your mind, because a lot of people think, oh, it'll be fine, I'll figure it out. But there are so many more things that I learned once I got out of the military that I didn't know when I was in. And there are things that I learned in that last little bit of the time that I was in the military that I also didn't know that would have been extremely helpful. For example, the Skill Bridge program. I mean, there's this program that allows you to intern at a job while you're still active duty, while you're still getting paid and getting all your benefits. You don't get paid from the job you're interning at, but the military is still cutting you a paycheck. So you get the opportunity for up to 6 months to work in a job that you potentially want to work at when you get out. A lot of them will hire you on after that internship, and it can make the transition a lot smoother. But the problem is a lot of people that are active duty are going to people that have never separated from the military for advice on how to separate from the military. They don't know what advice to give you because they've never separated from the military. So don't go to someone that's never been in the position that you're going to be in for advice on a position that you want to be in.
Okay, so now as you're talking, I'm writing stuff down because whenever you say something that's important to me, I write it down because I want to talk about it. I tell everybody that if they're going to separate, if they have even thoughts of separation, I want you to go, when you get home today, start a LinkedIn profile. Make sure you have a LinkedIn profile. I think have almost 30,000 connections on LinkedIn because you want to start building your network. Like for me, I realized, my net worth is connected to my network, to where, if I want, I know a lot of people, I've been connected to a lot of people. And it's nice to have mentors. It's nice to have people you can reach out to and talk to. Like if I have a cooking question, I can actually reach out to one of the Iron Chefs from the Food Network, and he can give me cooking tips. But it's all because I've been building a network for the last 5 years. And I believe that if you think when you're going to get out, I mean, there's no way about it. You're going to get out eventually. You need to start building a network. So definitely get on LinkedIn, set up a profile. And people say, well, I don't know what to do on LinkedIn. So what I did is I decided I'm going to send connection requests to people that I want in my life, whether that's an author, whether that's a speaker, whatever that's. So that's the way I built my network. And it's not about trying to DM somebody and just bug the shit out of them. That's not the way LinkedIn works for in a real way, in a good way. But just start building your network for people that you want to be around now and 5 years into the future. Like I want to be around Tony Robbins, Ed Milet, Gary Vaynerchuk. So I started 5 years ago saying, okay, where are they at? What are they doing? Who are they connected to? That's who I want to connect to. So talk about your experience on LinkedIn, because I think that's where we connected, was on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's interesting. You say that you tell people to get on LinkedIn, and I was told the same thing when I was still in, but I was told it in a different manner. I didn't realize that LinkedIn was such a heavy networking platform. I was told, oh, go create a LinkedIn profile. All these job offers are going to come to you because you're an aviation electronics technician And I'm on LinkedIn and I created a profile. I mean, this is a random person talking to me. And they're like, I created a profile on LinkedIn and I got all these job offers. So what I did was I went on LinkedIn, I created a profile, I put my basics of my resume in there, and I was like, I'm not getting any job offers. LinkedIn must not work. And so I stopped LinkedIn for a really long time, for a couple of years. And I kept hearing similar things from people like, oh, I created a LinkedIn profile, but I'm not on there a whole lot. And it was when I'm in network marketing is what really deep dove me into my personal development journey. And through network marketing, one of the girls that I was associated with did a keynote talking about LinkedIn. And she was talking about it for this network marketing company that I was part of. And she was talking about the guy that she learned LinkedIn from. And she was pulling leads from LinkedIn, and his name was Scott Aaron. And she was like, Scott Aaron does all these free, like, week courses all the time talking about LinkedIn. Go check it out. This is how I optimize my profile. And so I attended one of Scott Aaron's week-long trainings, got so much value from it, signed up for his LinkedIn Leads for Life, which really teaches you how to fully optimize your LinkedIn profile, but it also teaches you how to reach out to people in a way to really build your network. And I started implementing this process as a way to reach out to people, and I got so much traction from it, just meeting people. And I was like, this is absolutely amazing. I mean, people are so willing on LinkedIn, because I mean, I've tried the Facebook thing where you friend request someone, you reach out to them, and you try to build your network that way. People are not as open on Facebook, because I think Facebook is more of like a tight knit, it's your family and friends thing. So when a stranger reaches out to you, a lot of people automatically think, oh, there's probably some kind of alternative agenda. Whereas LinkedIn, you could reach out to someone and you could be like, hey, let's chat. How can we support each other? Let's just connect. And people are very open to it. And I really loved that about the platform. And so I started to build up my platform of military and veterans on LinkedIn. And I've started connecting with so many people in this space on LinkedIn specifically. And I start to find that there's all kinds of people that are working on different forefronts of what I'm trying to do, or maybe something that's not exactly what I'm trying to do, but something to better the community and the lives of military and veterans. And so I really started focusing heavily on LinkedIn because, again, I mean, it's such a phenomenal place to network, but no one had ever really explained that to me previously. And I wish they had. So I love that you bring that up and you say, hey, figure out what you want to do, or figure out where you want to be in 5 years, who you want to be around, and start connecting with the people that know them. And then, you're going to build up your network, and you're going to eventually be where you want to be because you started taking these steps. But I think what's key and what you said to me is that you had a laid out process of, this is where I want to be, this is how I'm going to get there. And I don't think that a lot of service members have that. I think that so many of us, when we're getting out of the military, are just kind of flying blind and doing what the last active duty person said to do, or the person that just separated. And I would say that, like, going to someone for advice that just separated from the military, or someone that's still in, probably isn't the best place to be. Maybe talking to someone like you, Richard, who, has taken the steps to actually get there, or, even halfway there, or someone who is at that next step to where you want to be if you are still in the military. I mean, I would say that, like, that is probably the gold nugget of advice right there. But LinkedIn is a phenomenal platform to build the network, but you have to use it as a networking tool. You cannot use it as like an Indeed.com.
Yep. And now, like, I'm starting my own course. I think we talked about it. I'm starting my own course as far as podcasting and how to reach out to people, because I think the only way a person is going to learn is if you start taking courses. Like for me, I decided, all right, I want to be one of the top podcasters in the world. I think we're in like the top 0.5% now, but it's all because I took courses by John Lee Dumas. I took courses by the nonprofit architect Travis Johnson. I took courses by Phil Better, because this way I want to know how to do things. So you have to spend money if you want to get where you're going. And I think the one thing about a lot of veterans, honestly, is we're cheap as fuck. And we're not going to say, or we'll reach out to somebody and be like, hey, bro, I'm a veteran. I need some help. And you're like, yeah, but for me, I've learned that people that pay attention.
Yeah.
So if you're a veteran and you want to find out, what you want to do in life, join a mentorship, get a mentor, join a mastermind, for people that are doing what you already want to do. And also, if you're on LinkedIn, like what I do, if I say with a podcast, if I see Rachel's putting out a new book, I'll DM Rachel and I'll say, "Hey, Rach, see your kind of new book out. Congratulations! I'm so proud of you. I would love to have you to come on the show to promote your book." End of story. Send. Click. I'm not talking about me. I'm helping promote Rachel and what she's got going on. Because a lot of people, they think it's the opposite. Well, it's all about me. But no, my friend Gary Vaynerchuk told me something once. He said, "Rich, if you want to be successful in life, in business, promote your friends 10 times more than you promote yourself. You'll never have to promote yourself again." So, guys, that's something I would say. If you're going to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, add with value. Start with value, not what you can get from them, but what you can do for them. So that's just something I wanted to put out there. All right. So, Rach, so where do we find your podcast? How do we support your mission? And what do you have going on for the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so my podcast, Your Story Doesn't End Here. It's going to be on all major podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to podcasts. My website, www.ysdeh.com, acronym right here. It's not fully ready yet, but it will be in middle of January is what we're gunning for right now. So it's up, it's there, but it'll be fully functional middle of January. And on there, you'll be able to purchase merchandise like this hoodie that's got the podcast logo on the back of it. And some T-shirts that, are talking about demanding better mental health for service members, military and veterans. And so super excited about that. You could also listen to the podcast on the website as well. As far as looking into the next 6 months to the year, Your Story Doesn't End Here is going to be doing some local events in the community in Whidbey Island, Washington. So if you are on the West Coast, keep looking out on the social medias for information about that. If you look at Instagram, I'm _YSDEH. My LinkedIn, I just use my personal profile, so you have to search my name to reach out to me on there, but I post a lot on there. And then Facebook, YSDEH as well on there. But as the thing that I'm most excited about, I would say, is that next year in 2023, I'll say it here, I haven't really said it anywhere else, but I'm going to be launching a mental health support group, the virtual mental health support group. The goal is to be meeting at least once a week, maybe starting out a couple of times a month. We'll see how it goes. And just have that platform of community for military and vets to get together and just chit chat. And I have a huge vision for where I want to see this going, but it's something that I've had in the works for a while as far as planning. And, what I realized is that military loves community and being around other military. And not a lot of people understand what the military have gone through other than other military. And so to have a platform where people can just get together, hang out, talk about, their struggles, their challenges, or just talk about their day. That's what I'm working on right now. So I don't have a set concrete date for that yet, but keep an eye out for that. And that should be launching in 2023.
Okay. So the last question I have is a 2-part question. We live in a crazy world. Actually, a lot of COVID shit is starting to come back. So I'm starting to see a lot of putting on face masks and all this crap. But we live in a crazy world. And if I ask somebody to do something in 7 days, they're never going to get to it. But if I ask somebody that's listening to our show to take an actionable step in the next 24 hours, they're more likely to do it. So I got a 2-part question I'm going to ask you. Number one, if somebody is struggling with their podcast and wants to improve it in the next 24 hours, what would you suggest? And the most important question is, if somebody is struggling with their mental health, what can they do in the next 24 hours to get some help?
So if someone is struggling with their podcast, it depends on what they're struggling with, but I'm just going to say, say that they've already launched and they're struggling to get views. Just self promote, post it on every platform and continue to do it. The most traction I've ever gotten on my podcast is when I am constantly promoting and asking people to also help me promote with that self promotion. But you have to sometimes take it into your own reins and do the work. And and you'll see the fruits of that, but you have to do the work. So that's an actionable step for that. As far as struggling with their mental health, what can they do in the next 24 hours? Realistically, I would say do something for you. If you're in a state of suicidal crisis, please dial 988 and get the help that you need. Don't sit with that. But if you need help and you're suicidal, please, the new number 988 is out. It is live. Dial that, get the help that you need. But if you're just struggling and you're having a hard time, everyone's going to be a little bit different. Some people, taking care of them is calling a friend. Some people, it's going on a walk, but do something for you, something that sets your soul on fire, something that excites you. And that is going to give you that, that dose of serotonin or that dopamine. And it might not help long term, that's where your therapy and everything comes in. But if we're talking right now, right here, right now, what can you do? Find something for you, whether it's new, whether it's something old that you've already enjoyed in the past, and just do it. Try it out.
I love it. So, guys, if you're watching this, make sure you check out her podcast. It's available on all the different platforms. Make sure you check her out on LinkedIn. She's got an amazing LinkedIn profile. She's truly crushing it. So, guys, like my T-shirt I usually wear says, "Today I decide." For me, those are the three most important words in the English language, because you get to decide whether you want to be a victor or a victor. And guys, so I want you to make sure you make the right decision today that you want to be a victor. So make sure you subscribe to the show. Leave us a comment about how you're doing with your mental health. And if there's any way that we can help you, both of us will definitely reach out and get in touch with you. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you so much for having me, Richard. It's been such a pleasure.
I love it. All right, guys, remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. I love you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow, guys. Have a great week.
Bye.